In this world, the most powerful girl is a girl who is not even 20 years old, and her name is Sierra Pernine. The young gentleman was delighted with Lady Pernin, and took great pleasure in telling her of their family, which was famous for its wealth. Their family was very influential, and others who knew them considered them a wonderful family. When another monsieur suddenly approached, he also expressed his opinion of the unheard-of beauty of the Count's daughter Pernin. The daughter of the famous Count, Sierra, had excellent data and appearance, which is why she received the beautiful nickname White Magnolia. A person who has just entered intervenes in the conversation. She was not very happy to hear others admire Lady Sierra, and told her to stop talking about nonsense. To which the gentlemen were indignant, and one said that she was not even good for Lady Sierra, to which the evil lady quickly left, calling them stupid. After she left, the young gentleman noticed that Lady Sierra's health was deteriorating, but his mother believed that she was fooling around and trying to attract male attention. This outraged two men, and the madam also decides to silently leave them. They could never believe that Lady Pernine could not be as innocent as they thought. Everyone considered her a delicate flower and tried to take care of her, but the main character did not let anyone near her. They firmly believed that she was innocent and considered her a poor thing, dreaming only of kissing her hand at least once. Rumors that Lady Sierra had fallen ill reached the palace Prince Leonardo. The prince noticed that she was often sick this year and ordered tulips to be delivered to her on his behalf. His servant was a little puzzled because it was winter outside where he would find tulips. He picks up a pen and writes her a letter, in which he talks about his feelings, that he regrets not being able to come in person, and that he worries about her health every day. The prince gave the servant the letter he had written, and ordered it to be delivered to Lady Sierra with flowers. The head servant looks at the prince, attracting his attention, and asks when he is going to get married. The prince is slightly puzzled by the question and clarifies who exactly he should marry, receiving the answer that he should marry Lady Pernin. He smiles softly. Even having feelings for her, he is not going to force her, especially since they have known each other since they were 3 years old and love each other like brother and sister. At the same time, in the beautiful and large mansion of Count Pernin, he is informed that a doctor has arrived. He asks sternly and wearily if the doctor has come to see the Sierra again, for this is not the first time this has happened. His eldest son, Vincent Perninet, with gray hair and the serious demeanor of aristocrats, answers in the affirmative. The father wearily leans on his hand and says that they will return to this topic later and begin to discuss more important matters. The Count asks his son about their affairs in the vineyard, to which the son replies that so far they refuse to sell, but it is only a matter of time. They also discuss their other affairs. At this time, in Lady Sierra's room, the doctor is very agitated and tells the lady to listen to him carefully. Sierra looks a little sick and tells the doctor not to waste time and inform her about her health as soon as possible. Lady Sierra listens to the doctor's words with mild surprise and some confusion, but remains calm. At this time, her maid, amazed by what she heard, pressed her palms to her mouth, trying to contain her shock. She can't stand it anymore and starts screaming, bursting into tears, sincerely feeling sorry for her mistress. Through tears, she says that it took the mistress 15 years to create and maintain the image of a sweet and innocent girl, all in order to become the crown princess, and now it is all in vain. The main character is annoyed by all this nonsense. In fact, she is very arrogant, and her cute personality is just an image. The maid continues to shed her tears. The mistress tells her to stop crying, reminding her that she is dying here, not the maid. She clutches her head and waves her hand in exasperation, chasing the maid away so that she would cry elsewhere. The main character is tired of feeling pain. She thinks that she has only 1 month to live, and she is going to spend every second usefully. Having learned from the maid where her father is, she gets out of bed and is going to visit him in the library. She throws a menacing glance at her maid, asking what she knows what to do, to which the maid looks at her mistress knowingly. A couple of minutes later, they gather in the library. The maid looks disheveled so that the mistress looks more beautiful against her background. The main character masterfully burst into fake tears, asking for forgiveness for disturbing her relatives. The maid got goosebumps from the gazes of her relatives, father and brothers. Countess Marie Uter Pernine was famous for her kindness and refinement. She died during childbirth, when she gave birth to her youngest daughter, Madame Sierra. Because of this, it seems that her loved ones dislike the Sierra, which makes the maid consider it dishonest, since her mistress is not to blame for what happened. Her strict father reveals that he knows about her situation and asks what she is going to do next. Seeing how the main character again breeds the drama, her older brother thinks about it. She does not need anything. And two younger brothers just shake their heads at the behavior of their sister. The main character always said that she didn't need anything, and then walked around until she got what she wanted, giving it out as if it was all because of her father's adoration. She has talent, after all. She is pernine, and her brothers only turn a blind eye to this. After all, she raises the status of their family. She spoke gently and quietly to her father, telling him of her humble request, which was that she needed a country and quiet house, 15 servants and 1 butler, and 10 million gold to live quietly through her remaining days. Her father and brothers stared at her silently, clearly shocked by her request. Silence reigned in the room. Continuing to pretend to cry, she said that she wanted no one to know about her condition and, calling the maid with her, left them. Her family was still in silent shock. Finally, her father spoke, realizing that all this time her daughter needed only money. They return to the mistress's chambers. The main character grabs her head and says that she is very tired. To which her maid is angry at her family. They knew that she was sick and still behaved cruelly towards her mistress. Not understanding the anger of the servant, the main character says that she is tired of pretending to cry for so long. It is due to the fact that she eats poorly, adhering to a strict diet all her life, which clearly has had a bad effect on her health. She finally decides to eat well and orders the maid to bring her food. Sierra gets up and walks to the window. The year has just begun, and already such news. She thinks it is hilarious, but she manages to do it. She will never give up because she is a white magnolia, but promises herself that she will no longer play the role of an innocent girl. The next morning, she stands in front of the mirror and admires her beauty. She will die soon, but she is still beautiful. Her maid runs into the room and reports that the carriage has been served. Today, the Sierra has put on her most beautiful dress. She gets up and gets into the carriage served. Her thoughts are focused on her dress. What a pity that she so rarely wore it, waiting for a better opportunity. The maid reminds her that in an hour she should be at Mrs. Spears' tea party and not at the manor, and since they will not be there in time, she should warn her that she will not be able to be there, to which the main character replies that she will not waste time on this. Later, she will write a letter of apology. Tea drinking with this madam is not easy. She remembered how Mrs. Spears proposed her to her son, whose face she does not even remember. All the young ladies and bachelor men gather there. Her brothers Jeffrey and Jasper will also be there. If Sierra is absent without warning, then her brothers will have a hard time. But what does she care about them? She smiles brightly and cheerfully, rejoicing at such an outcome. When Mrs. Spears bothered her, her brothers didn't help, so this time she'll repay them in kind. Sophie is very pleased with her mistress's decision. Her brothers have long deserved such an attitude. The carriage drives through the beautiful city in the direction of Pernine's house. They return home. At this time, at a tea party, the guests began to interrogate the Pernine brothers, asking about Lady Sierra and her well-being. One of the visitors asks what happened, and the purple-haired lady immediately begins to investigate, noticing that Lady Sierra has not appeared today and that her brothers do not seem to know anything about it. A young man who was the son of the Margrave, Kaisi Herbenson, is interested in who the Sierra lady is, about whom everyone asks. The young lady notices that Kaisi does not even know the names of influential people, although this is simple politeness. But it's okay, because he is Herbenson, their family is famous for their huge fortune, and the fact that they do not get involved in politics. They surprised the first emperor with his mastery of the sword. From that moment on, they were entrusted with guarding the diamond and gold mines. The emperor loved them so much that everyone who became a warrior was given the surname Herbenson, as well as the mine in his possession and the title of Margrave. The rest of the people envied them and informed on them at every opportunity, but the emperor only raised his hand and replied that it was okay. After all, he was Herbenson. For the next 500 years, the Herbensons successfully defended the borders, maintaining their position in the nobility. In each generation of their family, only one son was born. Their family visited the capital only once every 30 years, only when the Margrave's son was looking for a bride. The girl decides to grab hold of him and enter the most eminent family in the empire, but other visitors also want Herbinson's attention and offer to tell him about Lady Sierra. They immediately gave away all the information about Lady Sierra, even touched on her mother, who died in childbirth, and finally one of the guests pays attention to her brothers. But they were not in the room, and Lady Speaks told them that the brothers had long since left the tea party. According to them, they were worried about their sister, so they are in a hurry to see her. It seemed very cute to the gathered people. Kaisi was obviously out of the loop, but Lady Sierra interested him. She was very popular and everyone was talking about her. At the same time, Lady Sierra and her maid were on their way home when the sofa wondered why Milady had decided to leave her home and was hiding her illness from others. The main character was just annoyed. If everyone found out about her imminent death, they would constantly visit her. She would have to smile again and communicate nicely with them. Since she had so little to live, she didn't want to waste time on it. The maid was at a loss, because if she didn't like it so much when she was bothered with why she wanted to get the throne, then she would be bothered even more. The main character's eyes light up and the look becomes more tender. She admits that she loves the crown prince. The maid asks the mistress in surprise. The main character just shrugged her shoulders. Her answer was that she would die in a month anyway, so she decided to confess. The carriage stops at the mansion of Count Pernine, and the coachman helps Lady Sierra down. The main character is annoyed again. She is dizzy and almost fell when she went down. The maid is happy to see how angry she is. This indicated that the mistress has the strength to be angry, which is already good. Lady Sierra asks her maid to carry her to her chambers, to which the maid remarks that she seems to be much inferior to her. The butler runs to them and informs them that the count urgently wants to see Mrs. Sierra in his office. While the maid is again worried about the well-being of her mistress, the main character realizes that Herbinson was at the tea party since her father is in such a hurry. She turns around and walks towards her chambers. Now she is only interested in the crown prince. The butler began to fuss. The count ordered her to be with him as soon as he returned, to which he received a stern look from his mistress. She asked him to tell her father that she wanted to sleep and would look at him later, leaving the servants perplexed. The count is in his office, thinking about his daughter, whose behavior has changed a lot lately. The count made a lot of attempts to talk to his daughter, but she constantly found excuses and did not leave her room, ignoring her father. Father stared out the window and watched Lady Sierra play cutely with her pet in the yard. Previously, she did not play with the baby so often, since his hair remained on her clothes, but now she regrets it. The maid was concerned that she had ignored her father for so long. Such behavior could anger him, and the main character only brushed him off, saying that the most he would do was execute her for disobedience, and she would die 28 days earlier. Still, she asked Sophie to tell her father that she would talk to her father for 30 minutes and not for a minute more. At last the Earl managed to meet Sierra. They sat in the common room, and the father looked awkwardly at his daughter. Sierra elegantly held her hand to her chin, waiting for her father to speak. He began by asking about her health, but Sierra rudely interrupted him that they didn't have much time and that he should get to the point. Her father's eyes bulged in amazement. His daughter had always been diligent and affectionate towards him, and now she had blown out why she didn't go to Mrs. Spears's tea party, and that she was not going to attend such events anymore. She asked her father if he thought she wanted revenge on them, and immediately answered her question in the negative. She never expected anything from her family, and she had nothing to take revenge for. Sierra had always known that she had never been treated like a member of the family. The last 18 years of her life had not gone the way she wanted them to, and yet they were family. Sierra did not want to spoil their relationship. At that moment, the Count's face darkened. She reminded him of someone. He remembered his wife's gentle and playful voice. Sierra continued her monologue about how grateful he had done everything, and also told him the reason why she had asked for a house, servants, and 10 million. The desire to restore her health and return to social life again pushed her to such a decision. She also said that in 3 days she was going to the Imperial Palace for a ball and was going to leave, referring to business. The Count stopped her and again made sure that her daughter was a copy of her deceased mother and the Count's beloved woman. The Count also awkwardly asked if his daughter was going to leave, to which he received a negative answer, and the lady immediately left the room. Left alone, the Count finally realized that all this time he had not noticed the resemblance between his daughter and mother. He decided that he would persuade his daughter to stay and make up for everything that she lacked in childhood, just to see her smile again. That evening, at Pernine's mansion, the butler handed the Count a letter from the Sierra, saying that she liked the house so much that she bought it immediately. That same evening, when she moved there, she also asked her father to send her servants and the promised money for her, which greatly upset her father, who did not even have time to say goodbye to her. Lady Sierra and the sofa arrived at their new home, which looked dark and ominous. The main character was very pleased with her choice. Excellent design, wonderful garden, and also located far from the center, but the maid was not delighted and clung to the mistress in fear. She claimed that a couple who had not been allowed to be together had committed suicide in this house, and she was sure that a curse would fall on them if they stayed there. To which Sierra rebuked the sofa for her nightly gatherings with horror books, heading towards the house, while the maid again panicked about the furniture in the house, but the free furniture was only a plus for Sierra. With an optimistic attitude, Sierra expressed that she did not mind knowing in advance from the ghosts what awaits her after death. 25 days left, Sierra woke up in her new mansion, all so beautiful. Sofa was fascinated by her and did not hide her admiration. She was impressed that even being sick, her mistress only looked more beautiful every day. Not paying much attention to the words of the sofa, Sierra asked her to help get dressed. The sofa thought that good sleep and nutrition helped her mistress. Excited before the gala ball, the sofa promised that today Sierra would look even more beautiful, and of course the young lady did not miss the moment to boast of her beauty. That same evening, at the imperial ball, all the persons of the empire gathered, in elegant clothes. Several young ladies on the sidelines were discussing Lady Sierra, wondering if she would appear that day, since her father and brothers had promised to come. Rumors reached other people who also discussed the main character, spreading dirty rumors about her. And only Herbenson stood aside from all this. Again, everyone around was talking about a certain Sierra Pernin. He was interested in what she was like. He always saw her name on the list of invitees, but she never appeared. Still, he didn't understand why he should make so much fuss about one person when it was always like that in high society. He was pulled out of his thoughts by the loud announcement of the arrival of Lady Sierra Pernine. Lady Sierra, in an exquisite red dress, entered, immediately attracting everyone's attention. She noticed the stranger who was staring at her and turned her attention to him. Herbanson stared at her. It was not the time that he finally met her, and it seemed that the rumors about her beauty did not lie. But it looked completely different, not the way he had imagined it. Sierra immediately realized that this was the same Herbenson. He looked exhausted, as if he was not used to such a company. Noticing that he would not last long, she simply walked past him, still not going to linger. She was greeted by Mrs. Spears and joined her company. She immediately noticed her new dress and was sure that Lady Sierra had put it on purpose to hide her pregnancy. Sierra felt that Mrs. Spears was hiding something, and the others were also trying not to look at her. She realized what was going on. She would have worried about her reputation before, but now there was no need, because she was going to die anyway. She turned to Madame Spears and asked if she didn't look like the Sierra who was for innocence and purity. Her question baffled the rude madame, forcing her to shut up for a second. And other guests are shocked to turn in their direction. The hall was filled with awkward silence. Madame Spears did not expect such an answer from her. Laughing awkwardly, Madame tried to remedy the situation and complimented her dress on how it fit perfectly. The main character turned to another interlocutor and explained that it was the cold season and therefore she did not want to bare her shoulders. By doing so, she caused a general outcry and genuine shock among those present, shocking everyone with her unexpected reaction. She wished everyone present to enjoy the ball and was about to leave when an indignant Lady Spears suddenly called out to her. However, the main character ignored her words and calmly left the company, heading in the other direction without looking back. People were outraged that she dared to talk to the Marchioness of Carnium like that, and they couldn't contain their indignation as they continued to discuss her impudence, returning to the gossip about her pregnancy. Kais was in a disgusting shock from this company. Even though Lady Sierra was already here, they continued to discuss her. Unable to stand it, he was going to do something. As the arrival of the 27th Emperor, Empress, and Crown Prince was announced, which forced Kais to stop in place. Sierra also turned when she heard the announcement. Finally, she will meet the prince. The graceful royal family, dressed in magnificent outfits, entered the hall, attracting the attention of everyone present. At this moment, Kais remembered his father's words that Kais should faithfully perform his service, but under no circumstances should he approach the imperial family. They should get whatever they want, and if he has it, they will certainly get rid of him. He remembered where he was going, and noticed Lady Sierra standing away from everyone in seclusion. She looked beautiful standing by the window, and she had a strange expression on her face, as if it was time for her to leave. Sierra noticed someone's gaze on her and, feeling curious, looked in that direction to find out who was watching her. Her piercing gaze met Kais's, and he flushed with embarrassment. At that moment, he heard the other ladies talking about the crown prince, that he had disappeared right away, and that Kaisi was about to introduce himself, and he was curious if he would be back in the hall soon. He turned his attention back to Lady Sierra, but she too had disappeared, and her window seat was now empty. The crown prince and Sierra were outside near the fountain, and the prince asked Sierra if she had received the tulips he had sent her. But she did not even answer his question, and said that they had known each other for 15 years. The sudden change of subject surprised the prince. He laughed, noting that it had been too long since he was 7, and she was only 3 years old when they met. He remembered how she had sobbed loudly in the garden, lost and calling for her father, desperately trying to find him. At this time, the prince was sitting on a tree and, hearing the girls crying, decided to go down to her. He sat down on one knee and quietly calmed her, then asked who she was and why she was crying. After learning the whole situation, he led the girl to the main hall, where all the influential people were discussing their affairs. Sierra's father immediately ran to her as soon as he saw her and scolded his daughter for running away, then immediately apologized to the prince. And little Sierra at that moment said that when she grew up, she would marry a prince. Her father was embarrassed and tried to shut up his daughter, but the others laughed, and the emperor even noticed that she was a very brave young lady. The prince smiled heartily as he remembered those days. Only she could propose to the prince in such a way. She suddenly said that she adored him, and the prince was a little surprised by such a confession, not expecting to hear such words from her. Sierra looked at him and confessed that she had loved him ever since, 15 years ago. Her confession surprised him, but before he could say a word, Sierra immediately clarified that she was not going to spend the night with him or anything like that. She said that sooner or later she was going to confess to him, and if not now, then there might not be another chance. Immediately after confessing, she only thanked him and turned around to leave. The prince hurried and held her hand, not wanting her to leave. They looked into each other's eyes for a couple of seconds, and the atmosphere around them became very quiet and pleasant, filling the moment with a special meaning. But Sierra did not wait for an answer from the prince. She only wanted to confess, and so after saying goodbye, she quickly left. Leaving the prince in thought, she left, and he did not understand why she had done so. If she had just confessed her love, left alone, he felt that they were drifting apart. After Sierra left the prince alone, he stood and watched the retreating figure, but did not notice the man hiding in the bushes. The young lady who had overheard their conversation pressed her fist to her mouth in delight, unable to contain her emotions. It was Wilhelmina Ritchie, the daughter of a viscount who had been the secret editor of the newspaper High Society Nightlife, which had been published for 120 years, and people had condemned the newspaper for its scandalous stories. But the high sales spoke for themselves. Ritchie was very glad that Lady Sierra had finally appeared in society and decided to follow her, not expecting to hear such an important confession. She was already thinking about what she would call the article, going through many options, until she settled on Sierra Pernin and asked to spend the night with the prince. She decided to run home immediately, the whole night ahead of her, in order to publish an article by morning. At this time, Kaisi Herbenson finally got out into the street. He didn't expect that it would be so difficult to get used to this place. Then he notices a familiar figure and recognizes her as Sierra Pernin. She also notices him and greets him with a smile. He was surprised that she knew his name and noticed that she looked very happy. He was surprised that she knew his name and remarked that she looked very happy, even though he had previously thought she would be upset about the gossip at the ball. Happy that she confessed to the prince before her passing, Sierra decides to help the stranger. She asks him not to get too drunk, because in the morning he can wake up with a complete stranger who will claim that the child in her stomach belongs to him. She leans too close to him and says that the love that started easily will also end easily. She advises him to hide his true feelings behind a smile, because a smile really has great power. Kaisi was silent all this time, and Sierra did not care at all. She grabbed the glass from his hand and began to swirl it. She asks if she's talking too much, and adds that he might just forget everything that happened today, and then empties his glass in one gulp. She hands the glass back into Kaisi's hands and says that if they can get rid of the Emperor's family, then the Harbinsons will become the most powerful, and leaves him. Kais felt a little dizzy. It was strange because he was not drunk yet, but his face turned red and he began to feel an unusual warmth. Lady Wilhelmina had already said goodbye and was about to go home when she suddenly noticed Lady Sierra. In her mind, she told herself that tomorrow everyone would know about the proposed alliance with the Crown Prince, and then Lady Sierra would not be able to keep such a haughty face. Finally, the ball was attended by the rest of the Pernine family, the father and 3 brothers from the very threshold. The father, noticing his daughter, immediately began to ask how she was doing. He was going to appoint a guard for her. She says it's not the main thing right now and admits that she made a big mistake, adding that she should be honest with him despite the consequences. Her words immediately attract everyone's attention, and all eyes are fixed on the Pernine family. Lady Ritchie becomes nervous, realizing that Sierra is about to confess her love in front of everyone, and realizes that her article is over. As expected, Sierra announced with a happy smile that she had just confessed her love to a man she had loved for a long time. Her father and brothers were shocked, with their mouths wide open, unable to immediately comprehend what they had heard. The father asked his daughter again, not believing it to be true, trying to make sure he had not misheard. With tears in her eyes, she says that according to tradition, a woman should not be the first to confess her love, and as the daughter of a duke, she knew this when her father tried to raise her to be a lady, and therefore she should be expelled from the Pernine family. The brothers felt that something was wrong when Sierra moved out, but now they realized that she had decided to show her true colors. They realized that the image of an innocent girl was just a role, and that the real Sierra was just a copy of their mother. The strict and cold-blooded brothers even shed a tear when they remembered their mother. Lady Sierra apologized to the people for putting on this show right at the royal ball. She added that, in truth, they themselves were waiting for this, which caused a wave of indignant reaction among the audience. She said that was what she would show when she got tired of their grumbling and wished them a good time for the rest of the time. With a good sarcastic, she turns around and, with her head held high, leaves the ball. After she leaves, there is silence in the hall, but then loud and stormy discussions begin about the event that has just happened. Lady Ritchie was stunned that Sierra decided to tell about it. Instead of hiding it by clenching her fist, she promised that she would not forget it and would take revenge on Lady Sierra. Late at night, Lady Sierra is relieved to get into her carriage and goes home. Everything went according to her plan, and now she can cross out as many as 3 goals. The white magnolia is no more. She managed to confess her love to the prince and even left the family to Pernina. She looks at her reflection and smiles with satisfaction. If things go the same way, then she will close all her targets. The morning of the next day comes, and there are only 24 days left. The door to Lady Sierra's chambers opens with a crash and screams, waking the sleeping Sierra. Sofa entered screaming about what the mistress had done. If everything continued like this, she would be in danger, because in Sofa's eyes, the Pernine family seemed to be cold-blooded monsters. Sierra teases that she will only die 24 days early, to which she receives another portion of screams from Sofa, who assures her that her mistress does not deserve to die. Fully awake, Sierra gets out of bed and assures Sofa that no one will kill her. In return for what they gave her, she has been pretending to be gentle and fluffy all her life. And another reason is Sofa herself. The maid was surprised and asked her again. Even if Sierra encounters difficulties in aristocratic circles, she is sure that she will not lose face in the Pernine family, and as long as her maid is by her side, everything will be fine. It touched the Sofa, and they embraced. Then they knock on her door and tell her that an unknown guest has come to the Sierra, who is waiting for her on the street. She was angry and stated that she didn't want to have anything to do with the Pernine family anymore, but the maid insisted that only the imperial family was more powerful than the guest's family. Sierra realized that it was Kai's who had come, and with a little encouragement she said that she had changed her mind and decided to go meet the visitor. Kaisi was sitting in Sierra's living room, patiently waiting for her to appear. Sierra came out to Kai's in a smart dress, and he stood up as a sign of respect. Sierra invited Kaisa to sit down, and soon the maid brought them a cup of tea. Kais took a leisurely taste of tea, and the atmosphere seemed calm, filling the room with a pleasant feeling of comfort. Sierra appreciated the taste of the tea because it had just been brewed and given to her by Kais. The young man's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but after that, an awkward silence reigned in the room, which indicated that they had run out of topics to discuss. Sierra tried to keep up the conversation, but the young man did not succeed. Apparently he was nervous. She turned to him and asked what such a powerful man needed from a girl without status and family. This terribly embarrassed Kais, forcing him to clear his throat, and Sierra sat and smiled as if nothing had happened. He confessed embarrassedly that he had come to thank Lady Sierra. He is grateful to her for her advice, and now he wants to thank her. This surprised the main character, but she said that there was no need to pay. He repaid the first advice with wine, and the second with tea. Still, the young man did not give up trying and said that he wanted to ask something. It was obvious that he was still nervous and hesitant, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to formulate a question. He admitted that he wanted to make friends with the main character, and his words sounded sincere. Many men offered Sierra friendship, but she knew their true intentions, so she sent them off, however. As for Kais Herbenson, she was curious about what was on his mind. She asked him if he was willing to be friends with her, even if the friendship turned out to be short-lived, answering his questioning look that flowers had their own quirks. The young man's answer surprised the lady. He said that she was more like the wind than a flower. Then she told him that in this case the wind agrees to be friends with him, thereby making him very happy. But the Sierra agreed to be friends with him for only 3 weeks. Still, Kais was glad even of this opportunity. He knew that she was in love with someone else, and it was enough for him just to be next to her. After their friendship began, they were embarrassed and didn't know how to communicate now. Then Lady Sierra admitted that she did not have friends. This made Kais very happy because he had exactly the same situation. Sierra suggested that we come back to this issue later and discuss what the friends usually do. Kais readily agreed, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Having agreed to find out what the friends were doing and spend 3 weeks on it, they said goodbye, and Kaisi left. As soon as Kais stepped outside, a suspicious young man stood outside the Sierra's house and greeted him. He behaved strangely, sincerely worried about Sierra and asked about her well-being. Kais decided to agree that he would answer his question if he answered his. Then he asked what friends usually do. The strange man was a little surprised by such a simple question and replied that it could be a tea party, joint purchases, and just ordinary conversations. Still, Kaisi could not resist asking the strange young man, addressing him, "Your Highness, what you had forgotten here." The prince, pretending to be calm, said that, as expected, he was not so easily deceived since he was the son of the Margrave. The prince asked Kaisi if he would answer his question about Sierra's well-being. Kais immediately replied that she was doing well and that she looked much healthier. This pleasantly surprised the prince. Knowing how often she was sick, he felt relieved. The image of the Sierra leaving after the confession did not leave the prince's mind. He did not sleep all night, thinking about her words. Yesterday he had not been able to tell her that he too was in love with her, and now it was tormenting him. He couldn't understand how she could have escaped him so much after revealing her feelings, leaving him in disarray. Kais didn't understand anything as he watched the prince, who seemed to be lost in his thoughts. Suddenly someone called out to His Highness, and they both turned. It was the Pernine family. They were all together, a father and 3 brothers. The Pernine family was surprised to see the prince and the Herbenson, then asked what they were doing there. They receive a counter-question about the reason for their appearance here, because Sierra no longer belongs to their family. Their faces immediately darkened, for this was the reason they had come. They could not bear the idea that Sierra would now become a stranger to them. Only recently have they noticed how much their sister resembles their mother, and if they had realized this earlier, they would have valued her much more. The brothers felt deep shame and mentally begged her for forgiveness, hoping that she would spend the remaining 24 days with them. As they stood talking, a young lady hid behind a tree and watched them intently. She was very interested in why a whole group of men had suddenly gathered near Lady Sierra's house. And it was not just any men, but the most influential people in the entire empire. They were watched over by Miss Euphemia Carnium, the only daughter of the Carnium family, to whom her mother was unusually attached and often pampered her. The last time they had appeared at the ball in identical dresses, all eyes had been on Lady Sierra. Thus, the ball was ruined for Miss Euphemia, and she left it disappointed. Euphemia desperately hated Sierra's perfection. Everything she did was immaculately elegant. And today, she was even more annoyed because Euphemia noticed a suspicious man hanging around Sierra's house. She decided to follow him to make sure he didn't hurt her. In the end, Sierra did not even notice Euphemia's presence, and she turned around in a rage and decided to leave. At this moment, the main gate opens, and the butler comes out of it, confidently striding towards the gathering. Everyone else, not waiting for the butler to appear, stared at him in surprise, trying to understand what he was going to say. At this moment, the prince thought that Sierra had learned of his presence and decided to invite him by sending a butler. He wanted to introduce himself to the servant, but he just walked past him. Leaving the prince in an awkward state, the butler made his way to the Pernine family, ignoring his presence. Sierra's father was already delighted, thinking that the butler was heading towards them, but he walked still further and approached Lady Euphemia. He informed her that Lady Sierra wanted to see her and invited her inside, to which she rebelled, thinking that Sierra wanted to frame her. But when she went inside, she saw a very beautiful Sierra who received her warmly. She said that she seemed to be crazy, because she thought that right now Sierra looked very beautiful. Sierra replied that she knew and thought she was cute too, but this made the girl angry. She thought that Lady Sierra was trying to fool her and demanded that she tell her what she really wanted from her. The main character called the girl by name and began to approach her, causing her mixed feelings. Miss Euphemia was speechless and blushed at such close contact. While she pondered her beauty up close and admired her, the main character asked her question again, and finally I received a positive answer. Sierra smiled contentedly, because if she had a friend, she had to have a girlfriend for the sake of balance. She noticed in time that a lot of people had gathered around her house, so she thought that Euphemia would pass for a friend. Very tired, Sierra turned to her new friend and asked if she could support her for 2 hours, and Euphemia, as if spellbound, immediately agreed. The main character, Joyful, was heading to her room, singing along to a cheerful melody. She remembered the others who were waiting for her. There were her family and some stranger she didn't recognize. Deciding that sleep was more important to her at the moment, she decided that she would take them after she had rested. She wakes up as soon as 2 hours have passed, and Sofa informs her that Lady Carnium is waiting for her in the living room. Lying down, Sierra remembers Lady Carnium and asks the maid to help her clean up. Sofa softly and pleasantly combed her mistress's hair and said that the unknown gentleman and her family were still waiting for her outside. She tells them to wait a little longer, as Euphemia has been waiting long enough, while Lady Euphemia sat in the living room, eating desserts on both cheeks. She was delighted with the consistency of the desserts, crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. Suddenly, she woke up from her dreams and realized that she was sitting in the enemy's house eating this cake. She reminded herself that Lady Sierra had just humiliated her by making her wait for 2 hours. She thinks that Sierra didn't actually go to sleep, but laughs at the stupidity of the only heiress of the Carnium family, calling her a witch for charming her with her charm again. The main character politely knocked and asked permission to enter the hall where her guest was. Upon entering, she again appeared in a charming dress that emphasized her grace and elegance. Euphemia began to rebel again, dissatisfied with what was happening, but Sierra quickly stopped her, saying that those desserts were specially and carefully prepared for her friend. She carefully brushed the crumbs from Euphemia's face, showing her care and tenderness. Miss Carnium, stammering with embarrassment, asked if Lady Sierra really considered her her friend. Lady Sierra happily confirmed that she considered her her friend, and added that Euphemia was her first friend, and with a beaming smile, she continued that she had one wish. Euphemia had already begun to fantasize about how if they became good friends, Lady Sierra would admire her. Of course, Miss Carnium was happy to confirm that they would be friends, just as Lady Sierra had wished. The main character confessed to her new friend that she had no idea what it meant to be friends and asked if she could tell her about it. Miss Carnius gladly agreed to share her experience because she herself was friends with such an amazing girl as Lady Sierra for the first time. The main character decided to use Euphemia, and then she herself would do similar things with Mr. Herbinson. She turned to her friend with a smile and said that since they were now officially friends, then Euphemia could go to her home. Sierra reminded her friend that guests were waiting for her outside, and since she was an understanding friend, she had to go home. But in response, she received only a loud no. Friends should do everything together. With these words, Euphemia gave an ultimatum, claiming that they must meet her guests together. Sierra was a little surprised at first, but then, smiling brightly, agreed. 10 minutes later, Sierra's father and brothers were finally allowed into the mansion. They entered with expressions of excitement and expectation on their faces. The men sat on one side and the girls opposite, staring at each other. Sierra began the conversation by asking why they had come to her, her father and brothers looking a little worried. At the same time, Crown Prince Leandro was still being groped by the butlers for foreign things. The Ironblood Pernine is an authoritative and influential family, about which there are rumors that their image of a good family is just a game. Pernine have one thing in common: they are all sharp in mind and stingy with emotion, and they never show their feelings for those who do not meet their strict standards. And they consider themselves flawless, without thinking about the feelings of others. The main character was also different from them, but in order to survive in this family, she came up with the image of a sweet and innocent girl. Although now they sit in front of her and look like they sincerely love her. Only Countess Marie Vader, her mother, truly loved her. Her father and older brother, looking at her with a pitiful look, felt the gravity of the situation. They saw her become very thin and sick, and they were tormented by the thought that they should have paid attention to her condition earlier. The girls clearly do not understand what is happening, as her usually cold-blooded brothers can barely contain themselves from crying. One of the brothers could not answer why he fell ill. As Sierra interrupted him, she looked at them coldly. It only now dawned on my brother that there was a stranger in the room who did not know about the situation of the Sierra. The elder brother intervened, interrupting the tension in the room. He said they had come to apologize to her for the pain they had caused her. Sierra, her eyes bulging in surprise, only froze in silence, allowing her older brother to continue. Then, tilting her head, she asked if she did not trust their words. Her brother, gathering his courage, added that Sierra did not have to forgive them. He said that he had heard from her father that she did not need their love, but that it was they who did. He admitted that it was because of her that he began to think about his mother, although in childhood he hated her for what she was not guilty of. But now, when he looks at her, he sees his mother, and this feeling throws him into disarray. They realized how wrong they had been, and with sincerity in their voices, they asked Sierra for another chance. Her older brother also begged her to return to the estate and spend the last 3 weeks with her family. At this, Sierra only silently looked at her brothers and father, making them involuntarily shrink under her heavy gaze. Sierra asked irritably if they really loved her, or if she was more of a mother she had never met. The brothers were shocked by her statement and froze with their mouths open, unable to find words. Sierra asked again if that was why they wanted her back, to take care of her as the last reminder of the late countess. Sierra wearily covered her face with her hand, realizing that their sympathy arose only because she reminded them of their mother, which meant that they needed her and not Sierra herself. She told them to leave, adding that their servants used to serve her family, and she didn't want to kick them out right in front of them. At the end, she added that they should no longer ask her for forgiveness, because she does not regret anything and has never sought to love or be loved. She smiled goodbye to them, apologizing if she had insulted them, then added that now she did not have to hide her emotions, because she was not attached to anything else and to anyone. This whole situation shocked the girls who were on the team. Silence reigned in the crew, and Count Pernine and his sons still did not leave, frozen in place in shock. At this moment, the silence is interrupted by a servant who runs into the room and calls for Lady Sierra. The servant leaned over to the lady and, without breaking the silence, whispered important news directly into her ear. Upon hearing the news, Lady Sierra froze for a moment and then stood up and announced that it was time for her to go. Sierra took Euphemia's hands in hers and gave her a snowy look, apologizing, explaining that she had to leave her because she had an important guest. She addressed her family again in a harsh voice that made everyone present shudder. Her words were addressed to her father, hoping that he would seriously think about their meaning and take her opinion into account. Then, slamming the door loudly, she left them. It was now Euphemia who turned to the Pernine family after the awkward silence that followed Sierra's departure, expressing that they could have done better. At this time, Sierra followed a servant who led her directly to an important guest. She walked into the room and looked at him, not hiding her interest. The Crown Prince was standing in front of her in the room. He greeted her and said that they had finally met. She whispered to Your Highness and stood still, not taking her eyes off him. The Crown Prince had always considered the Sierra special. At boring balls, they always slipped away together to take a walk. And on birthdays, they always sent each other gifts and warm cards. Among all the nobility, Prince Leandro personally wrote congratulations only to Lady Sierra. Their relationship, which no one considered anything special, eventually became commonplace for them. If Sierra really has feelings for him, this relationship will inevitably come to an end. The prince looked at Sierra with adoration and said that she looked fine today. Sierra replied that she was fine, and the prince smiled and said that he was glad to hear it. The prince reminded her of the day when Sierra had suddenly left without hearing his answer, leaving him alone with his thoughts. In response, Sierra asked if he wanted her to hear his answer and added that she would not accept his offer anyway. After her answer, the prince was silent for a while and then asked how long she had been in love with him. Sierra had been in love with him since the day they met in the imperial palace. He asked again if she had fallen in love with him from the first time they had met when she was crying and looking for her father, and he received an affirmative answer from Sierra. The prince realized that she had been silent about her feelings all this time and asked her why. Sierra admitted that she dreamed of marrying him, being his partner and wife, not his mistress. She wanted to be close to the brightest sun, but at the same time she herself meant something, even after death. After listening to the Sierra, the Crown Prince said that he would soon have to make a choice of bride. And when that time comes, he firmly stated that he would choose her. Sierra only smiled and said that she knew this because all this time she had been trying to be the closest person to him, and the prince in response asked her to wait a little longer. The main character replied that she had already been waiting for 15 years, to which the prince remarked that it was not so much, and asked if she regretted the time spent, to which Sierra replied that she did not, and what happened is gone. The next morning came, and there were 23 days left until the end. Sierra abruptly woke up on her bed, her eyes widening. She stood up abruptly, surprising Sophie, and said that she needed to get ready because they were leaving. She sat down in front of the mirror, and Sophie reported that many letters had been sent to her. Sierra had ordered her to read them. The first was a letter from Mr. Herbenson, who wanted to invite Lady Sierra to tea. He could come at 3 o'clock. This was followed by a letter from Lady Carnium saying that friends were throwing parties, and Sierra invited her to her house at 9. Then there was a letter from Count Pernine, and Sierra suddenly became gloomy, saying that she would not answer this letter. Sophie asked the mistress where she was going at such an hour, for it was still morning. Sierra replied that she was going to the imperial palace, and Sophie thought that perhaps her mistress would have a meeting with the Crown Prince. Sophie had seen the prince after his conversation with Sierra the previous evening, and he looked depressed, which made the maid feel sorry for him. As Sophie thought about the situation, Sierra, adjusting her hat, said that she had a bad feeling. Sophie did not understand why Sierra had such a premonition. It was her father and brothers. She doubted whether they would stab her in the back. She trusted her family and hoped that she would cope on her own and that she would not have to bother anyone. They had always been rational to the core, and for all her 18 years of life, they had turned their backs on her. She clenched her fist, and her furious demeanor made Sophie nervous, so she asked her to calm down. According to the documents, Sierra was still Pernine, so she decided that she would immediately go to the palace and give up her identity. 11:30 a.m. in the palace. At this time, the employees of the library, where all the records of the kingdom were kept, were engaged in their routine work. At that moment, a special guest, Lady Sierra Pernine, entered the library. She greeted them and asked if there were special documents in this department that recorded the genealogical tree of all noble families. The workers came to their senses and asked how they could help. Sierra was in a hurry and replied that she would like to see the latest records of the Pernin family's generation. This greatly surprised the workers, and they began to suspect that perhaps the Count had illegitimate children. One of the workers quickly found the genealogy of the Pernin family, placed it on the table, and showed it to the Sierra. She asked him to open the last page and asked if her name was there, to which the worker replied that it was, so Sierra smiled sweetly again and asked them to burn her name with a cigarette. The workers gathered and stared in amazed shock, unable to believe what was happening. One of them couldn't stand it anymore and asked her to repeat it, which made Sierra a little angry. She repeated her demand again and added that she didn't like to repeat it twice. There have been similar cases before, but these were parents who threatened their guilty children. But for the Countess herself to ask to cross out her name, this happens for the first time in the empire. The workers were afraid that they could be fired for this and told the lady that it was impossible. The girl asked the reason. One of the employees first needs to contact the higher management to determine the legality of her actions. There was silence in the room, and Sierra interrupted her and asked if the workers could do it. The employee said that he needed to wait for some time until he received a response from his superiors. The workers cowered in awkwardness and fear as Sierra stared at them in silence. She covered her face with her hand and laughed nervously, noting that she didn't think it would be so difficult to remove her name. And then she suddenly fainted, and her maid panicked. Sierra was so tired that she fainted, and her maid and the workers immediately rushed to her. At 2:45 p.m., she was already sitting at home on a cozy sofa. When Kiz came to the tea party, he looked at her and said that he had heard about her fainting. Sierra replied generously about how quickly the rumors were spreading, and it had only been a few hours. To which Kiz added that everyone is discussing it. This did not surprise Sierra, and she said that this is always the case, adding that it is interesting what these people will do when she dies. Kiz was serious. He was a little wary of Sierra's words. He asked if she was all right. Sierra didn't answer, but she thought that he always had such a serious face. Their family always came to the capital just to find a bride. Kiz added if she could handle everything that was happening, to which Sierra replied that she would not. But her thoughts were still elsewhere, she wondered, given his seriousness, if he would find a wife at all. Sierra asked him bluntly if he was worried about her, to which Kiz immediately replied yes, because they are friends. A little embarrassed, Kiz wanted to say something, but Sierra preceded him, saying that they were friends. She added that friends usually trust each other and advise each other, then asked if Kiz wanted to know what was bothering her. Kiz readily agreed, and Sierra told him all about the unsuccessful attempt to erase her name from the bloodline. Herbinson suggested that there might be something wrong with the rules since she was so saddened. Sierra replied that this had never happened before, so the procedure was much more complicated, and it would have been easier if there had already been such a person. And then it dawned on Kiz, Sierra was wrong, such a case had already happened. This immediately intrigued Sierra. She got up from her seat and asked what he was talking about. Then she asked him to speak faster and to the point. The Herbinsons keep their family's entire history in their own library, where books are crammed from top to bottom. As a child, Kiz was often read by them. Usually those who insulted the family's honor were stripped of the title, but there was one person who wanted to be banished, and Kiz knew how he had done it. Sierra was pleasantly surprised, because after all there was such a case, and finally she had a chance. She asked Kiz what was needed for this. Kiz replied that she would probably need the consent of her family. She decided that she had to meet her father and asked Kiz to join her. Then, taking the maid with them, they headed for the exit. Sophia asked her mistress what she intended to do, to which Sierra replied that she did not know and that the main thing now was just to start. They arrived at the mansion of Count Pernin. Her father and brothers were very happy to see her and even began to cry. Count Pernin was sure and believed that his daughter loved them after all. Sierra gently called her father and took his hand, turning her acting back on. She noticed that the Count did not look well and asked if he was sleeping well. Her father would have told her everything with tears, but Sierra interrupted him, reassuring him that she already knew everything. Looking at her father with a tender look, she asked if he really loved his Sierra. Her father replied that of course, and her brothers joined him, also in tears. The Count even confessed that he loved only her and no one else, and then Sierra said that if this was the case, then she had only one wish left. With crocodile tears in her eyes, she added that only her father could fulfill her wish, and shed a couple of tears. Her words and tears touched the Count. Then he told her to tell him, and he would do anything for her. Still crying, Sierra said that if that was the case, then she needed his consent to sever all ties with her family. The father, ready to do anything for his daughter, said loudly that he would tear them apart. Already out of breath with a desire to help, he calmed down, and only then did he realize what his daughter's request was about. He was shocked and asked his daughter what she said. Sierra, pleased with her prank, thanked her father and said that she did not know that he would fulfill her request with such zeal. The Count understood the whole situation and immediately tried to justify himself, but he was interrupted again. It was Sierra who turned to Kaisi and thanked him for being a witness. Since Herbenson had heard everything, she asked them to sign the papers and added that Count Pernine would not back down on his word. Sierra said that if he signed, she would be the same as before and be his beloved daughter. The Count immediately signed a document confirming that the Sierra no longer belonged to the Pernine family. She also took Kaisi's signature as a witness and thanked her father. Then, turning to her family, Sierra asked them not to come again, saying that meeting them was a waste of time for her. One of the brothers yelled at her that if she decided to die without seeing them, she should return everything that Pernine's family had given her: servants, a house, and money. The Count and the other brothers stared at the brave man in fear, and Sierra remained silent, her maid immediately realizing that all this would end badly. Without a single emotion, Sierra coldly told her brother to take everything in that case. Even more outraged by his sister's behavior, her brother began to scold her, saying that not everything in the world works the way she thinks until he gets hit on the head. Another of the brothers cut him off, and then, laughing nervously, said that he had drunk too much yesterday and was still not recovering. Sierra thought about her brother's words and agreed that if she depended on her family financially, it would put her in a hopeless situation, but quickly made the decision to sell the house and the decorations, which made her family nervous, and her father said that it was no longer summer and that she could not go without a home. Herbenson did not stand aside and told them not to worry about it. Lady Sierra could always ask the Herbenson family for help. Because they are friends, Sierra gladly agreed to this. But Count Pernina did not like this, and expressed his opinion that since when had she come to rely on the Herbensons, but even then Sierra replied that a lot had changed in 18 years, and perhaps her father would have to turn to the Herbenson family someday. The daughter's words hit her father hard. His younger brother began to speak for him. He suggested that Sierra continue to live in the house, and as she herself suggested, she would sell her unnecessary dresses and jewelry to pay rent. Then she would not owe them anything. She was satisfied with such conditions, and she noted that at least her younger brother was not as stupid as the others. She turned around and said that was all. At parting, her younger brother bowed to her and said that from now on, he would pretend that they did not know each other. Sierra returned to the library, and the worker finally said that she had been struck from Pernine's family, having first checked all the documents she had collected. She sighed contentedly, as if a weight had fallen from her shoulders. She was no longer Pernine, and she only had her name left. Sierra thanked Kais heartily for his help and invited him to a pajama party. Together they were heading towards her house. Then Sierra apologized for dragging him into her problems. Kaisi waved it off. He had nothing to do anyway. Sierra asked what he was doing in the Gokben. Kaisi told her that he had been training in the morning, and in the afternoon, as a future Margrave, he was doing the things entrusted to him by his father. Time in the capital was very important to Kais, but he still didn't understand why his father had sent him here. Maybe he should do something, but he hadn't been given clear instructions. Her father only told him to meet people and make friends, and Sierra realized that Kaisi took everything at face value and did not understand the situation he was in. People like him had no place in the capital. But Herbenson is an exception. No one would dare to contradict him, and Sierra, turning to him, said that she knew. The reason why the Margrave sent his son to the capital is because he wants Kais to change. Then she added that, in fact, everyone from the highest circles knows this. Sierra also noticed that he lacked attentiveness. One could have guessed from the behavior of the others a long time ago. Kais said that he really noticed the strange behavior of the others. They behaved somehow unnaturally. She reached out and placed it on Kai's cheek, saying that whoever he fell in love with would receive the gold and diamond mines belonging to the Herbenson family. Sierra looked Kai straight in the eye and said that he was also young, handsome, strong, and honest. This means that every woman in this empire wants to be with him. Her gesture greatly embarrassed Herbenson, and Sierra, pulling away, finally told him directly that his father wanted him to marry. Kai finally understood the reason. Sierra rejoiced and laughed, but Kaisi did not understand the reason for her joy. Now all the women are fighting for the attention of Kai's, and the men are trying to marry their sisters, Sierra noted. The girl should live up to the title of Margravine of Herbenson. The protagonist began to walk away, and Kais turned to her, saying that he couldn't decide who to marry without mutual consent. This made Sierra laugh. She mentioned again that they are the most powerful family in the empire after the imperial family. And then Kaisi asked about her. Would she accept his offer or reject it? She looked at Herbenson in surprise, not expecting such a question. And then she replied that she would reject. She wouldn't have accepted his offer. After hearing the answer, Kais fell silent thoughtfully. He then said that what Sierra had said earlier, that no woman in the empire would refuse his offer, was a lie. And to this, Sierra only showed her signature smile and answered in the affirmative. Kais, having received an obvious refusal, became sad. But still he decided to take her home, and they got into the carriage together. Kais's mood soured, and all the way he looked sadly out of the window. Sierra sat opposite him, looking out the window, and Sofa yawned, as she was very sleepy. Sierra thought that she was the only woman in the empire who could give up on Herbensenu. Glancing at Kais, she mentally asked him for forgiveness, but the truth was that she had no regrets. She's going to die anyway if it's all over soon. There's no point in her regretting anything. At the same time, in the imperial palace, the imperial family sat at the table and ate, discussing important issues and the latest news from the capital. The emperor asked if it was true that Lady Sierra had crossed her name from the bloodline. To the king's question, the queen answered in the affirmative. While the prince was thinking about something, his parents continued to discuss the Sierra, and judging by how frightened the employees of the department were, the rumors do not lie. They were sure that Count Pernine was a wonderful father who loved his children, and they could not understand how this could happen. At this time, the prince dropped his spoon and jumped up from his chair, shouting his bewilderment as to why Sierra had done so. The prince continued to shout, calling the count crazy for allowing his daughter to leave the family, which shocked his parents. The queen shouted back at him that he was too loud. Leandro calmed down a little but still continued that the young girl was left to the mercy of fate, and why would she want it herself? The queen, also calmed down, said that they all knew the reason. According to the imperial custom, a woman cannot be the first to confess her love, so she was expelled from the family. The king, banging his fist loudly on the table, stood up and also raged about Sierra's innocence. The defenseless child could not be the first to confess her love. He claimed that some scum had seduced her and that they should find him, when the prince shouted at them to stop. He confessed that the scum to whom Sierra confessed her love was him. Thus, he shocked his parents. He was very ashamed that Sierra had been the first to confess her feelings to him, so he turned around and ran out the door. The king and queen, still standing in shock, only looked back at each other. This news clearly pleased the king. His eyes sparkled, and he didn't see a problem in getting married right now. The queen asked in a stern tone if the king understood the situation of the Sierra at the moment. Sierra Pernine had abandoned her family and lost her title. The problem was that she was no one now, and the most important thing that worried the queen was the rumors that Sierra was going to marry Herbenson. The queen's last words shattered the king's peace and dreams. 21 at Lady Sierra's house. Kaisi sat all red, covering his face with his hands in embarrassment, while Sierra did not understand his embarrassment, because friends at parties often sit together on beds, eat, drink, and have fun. But Kiz was still embarrassed. He believed that it was impossible to be in the same bed with a woman before marriage. While Kaisi was asking his father's forgiveness in his mind, Miss Euphemia noticed the crumbs in the bed, and Sierra said that they would clean them up later. Lady Carnium suddenly remembered what she wanted to do at the pajama party and invited everyone to play Truth or Dare. Sierra did not know what it was, so Euphemia had to explain the essence and rules of the game. Euphemia added that if someone does not want to answer the question, he will have to drink, so it is better to answer the question. Euphemia was the first to roll the dice, and she was drawn number 1, which meant that she could ask any question she wanted. She was very happy with her successful roll, and Kaisi was shocked that she managed to do it on the first try, but Sierra immediately understood the plan of the Ethiopia, because she did not even throw, but simply placed the dice in this way. Euphemia, giggling, turned to Herbenson and asked if there was a girl in the capital who took a liking to him. He hesitated a little, wondering if he should answer, but then he made up his mind and drank a glass of wine. Lady Carnium was a little disappointed when she didn't hear an answer, but she had another chance, and she rolled the dice again. This time it was also a 1. She turned to Herbenson again and asked if the hair of the girl he liked was red, to which he firmly replied that he did not. His answer made Lady Carnium feel uncomfortable, and Lady Sierra laughed. "What a pity." Clearly amused by this situation, Sierra noted in her thoughts. Kais was really honest. Kaisi did not take his eyes off the Sierra, although he had only drunk 1 glass of the drink, and his head was already beginning to spin. It was Mr. Herbenson's turn to roll the dice. Everyone was looking at the die when they saw that Kais got a 6. Euphemia asked Kais who he wanted to ask the question, and his gaze immediately darted in the direction of the Sierra.